Today I am here with a special guest, a psychologist, Dr. Jerry Wickman. I think we are on screen now. Hi,
Good to
Dr.
see you.
Wickman. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Today I'm going to just do a little review of your background and who you are and why I have you here today. And then we're going to jump into 3 questions, some of the very simple questions. I'm going to turn my light off here. The first and foremost are, what are some early signs of anxiety and depression in the pediatric population? And then what we can do to help that, and what treatment options are, and maybe some habits we can avoid in the house so that our children have the best odds of returning to school safely, because we are so excited to get everyone back to a normal routine. So Dr. Jerry Wickman is a clinical psychologist and adolescent health specialist at Hoag Hospital's Neurosciences Institute in Newport Beach. He's counseled more than 5,000 teens on how to navigate contemporary pressures, including parents, academic work, social challenges, friends, and stress. His clinical practice inspired him to create the Teen Brain Program and launch the Weichman Clinic. Founded in 2009, which has been a huge asset to pediatricians like myself in the area, the Weichman Clinic is one of the only true comprehensive mental wellness programs focused exclusively on the unique needs of children and adolescents. Dr. Weichman is the author of Teen Survival Guide, How to Deal. Dr. Weichman has been interviewed for and quoted in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times, and appeared on ABC and Fox networks. He also speaks to parents, teachers, administrators, and students about bullying and cyberbullying, substance abuse, sexting, depression, academic performance, parental expectations, teen sexuality, eating disorders, body image issues, stress-related disorders, teen behavior issues, and teen social drama. Dr. Weichman holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Pacific, where he played college football and earned his master's degree and doctorate in clinical psychology from the California Graduate Institute of the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. He likes spending his free time with his family, traveling, and snowboarding. Anything I missed there? I know that you're very well-spoken and always on a speaking engagement. My patients come back from some of the talks you do at the local schools with something they've learned and want to talk to me about. So I'm so glad to have you. Thank you for being here. Is it okay if we just jump into our first question? And
Absolutely.
We'll see what happens with any live questions that we get here. So first and foremost, I have our question streaming at the bottom, and it's actually, we want to start with early signs that your child needs help. So what are some of the things a parent can pick up on so we aren't at a crisis mode with a child who might really be depressed and threatening their life or something more serious in that arena?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, your kid's not like a car where you can plug it into a computer and it spits out what's wrong with your son or daughter. So there's actually some very subtle things that as a parent you want to start looking for. It would be changes in food. They start eating a lot more or eating a lot less. There's changes in sleep patterns. Obviously, as they hit the adolescence and that stage of development, they're going to sleep longer. But what you really want to look for is sleeping a lot less and or waking up frequently in the middle of the night. You're going to see changes in what we call somatic issues, which is recurring headaches, stomach aches. A lot of the time the kids will, if they're repressing and stuffing how they're feeling, our containers can only hold so much. So when those kids start hitting that breaking point, a lot of the internalizers, their body will start to express what they're really struggling with emotionally. So you want to look for those signs, especially if you've gone to a physician and they can't find anything wrong with your son or your daughter. Other things that you want to look for would be additional irritability, more irritable than normal. The teen angst thing is, that's a kind of a normal thing in a lot of ways, but at the same time, adolescent depression especially doesn't look like us for adults, where we've got really dark circles under eyes, can't wake up, a high percentage of depressed teenagers are really, really irritable. So you want to look for that. Certain sudden drop in grades, sudden concentration problems, or other ones. So, you really shouldn't need more than one of these things to flag yourself and be, hey, there's something that needs to happen here, and get your kid evaluated. Honestly, the last thing, I can't really say this for all the dads out there, but I can definitely say it for the moms. Trust your gut. I mean, I've been doing this 22 years and seen over 6,000 families to date, and never in my life ever have I seen a mother's intuition be wrong. That feeling in your gut, the thoughts that go by the back of your head, there's an uncanny sonar ability that moms, not just even with biological, non-biological, so I've seen it with adopted kids as well. You got to trust your gut. It'll always lead you, especially with your kids.
I just put that summary up there. I'm just curious why you're mentioning moms.
A lot of the time, the dads aren't as connected to their kids, it seems like. And I don't know if that's a function of, it's a psychological, emotional thing, or it's they're often working in a traditional kind of a sense, and the moms are more home. But some dads definitely do have that ability, but I've seen it consistently with the moms.
Okay. And I do think there's a sense that dads really want to toughen up their kids. They don't want a wimpy kid who gets picked on, so they want to teach them tough love. But I do see that the mothers get a little more nervous when they seeing their child a little more fragile in areas that they were normally comfortable. And this is so important right now because I asked you to come talk today because in my office I'm seeing strange behaviors in children that I've known for a long time. They're very anxious, worried, withdrawn from me when they know me well because they've been in a very isolated home situation this pandemic, and they're hearing their parents talk. Any separate signs that you would say for younger children to look for? I know separation anxiety comes and goes in those early years. And when they would want to come see you, maybe directly. And I want to mention seeing a psychologist directly because pediatricians are not trained in psychology. And we often get these questions, and depending on your pediatrician, they're going to draw from their own experience rather than speak from a place of knowledge. So I would like to just reinstate that it is not a pediatric office visit where you are going to get answers for these issues. For the younger kids, what would we see?
A lot of the younger kids will exhibit some of those somatic symptoms. They're going to have headaches, stomach aches. They're going to have a tendency to have a lot of avoidance, avoiding things that are aversive to them across the board. You're going to see some kids that will start to worry more about things that are not specific to their day-to-day lives that are going on in the world, or what if this happens. You're going to have younger kids will have nightmares or night terrors. And, you're going to see some kids that exhibit stress and anxiety through other things, biting on, putting their fingers in their mouth, biting on things a lot, biting their nails, kind of that oral fixation to self-soothe. But you want to look for some of these signs with them. And also, when you need help is really when it starts impeding their day-to-day life functioning.
Yeah, and that is key, and that's what is always reiterated in my office. When are you actually stopping what your normal routine is because you can't function? That's what pathology really is. When something that, you have this continuum, and something that was functional, you can keep functioning, then finally you're always late to school, or you're not able to go to the park, things that would be a normal part of your day. These are great tips because I see just a few of them, but of course, they're the definition of depression or anxiety, but we don't even think about them in plain terms. Let me see if I have any questions. No, I'm just trying to summarize your points. Okay, let's go to the second point then. So what are treatment options, not necessarily even having to come into you, but maybe that's what, maybe let us know when it is time that someone needs to come into you, or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, for both anxiety and depression. Maybe you can speak to when a psychiatrist is needed versus a psychologist, or anytime you think the role of the pediatrician would be enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really depends on where the child's level of functioning really is. Can they get up and really keep up with their day-to-day life and expectations? And if you're seeing limitations or problems with that, then it's time to start getting some help. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be dealing with physical symptoms, stuff with the body, the physician's a good place to start. Physicians are well trained enough to be able to see, okay, I'm not really finding anything. You really need to see a psychologist and direct you from there. But, really what we want to do is we want to be proactive. I mean, that's why I'm sure you do these things. This is why I'm all over on social media or talking with people and doing interviews. But it's about learning tools so that you can be proactive, because I feel like the pandemic's been really difficult on everybody, and really, really difficult for the pediatric and adolescent population. And we're just at the very beginning of, a really tall hill that we're going to climb when it comes to severity and acuity of mental health issues, unfortunately, because it is going to be hard to transition. And it is going to be hard to get back into it. So, it's good to learn tools. And so, to mention, we're talking about anxiety with younger kids. If your kid is having anxiety or fears about certain things, and they're not really coming from a valid source, because that's what our anxiety is. It's irrational fears. It's okay. You want to hear them out. You want to be able to talk to them. But what you don't want to do is nurture an anxious kid in an anxious situation, because their brain is giving them irrational thoughts, and it creates a mirage, and then they get reactive to the mirage in their mind's eye. And if they're always social, your kids are always social referencing you. They're looking to you to see, am I okay? Are we okay? Is life okay? And how you react and respond to situations, let alone how you are in the home, will give them that answer without you even having to speak. So, as parents, we really want to be able to provide that stability. We want to keep, disagreements to a minimum, or have them on a sidebar conversation. We want to be monitoring and careful what we're talking about in front of our kids, as well as phone conversations. As much as they pretend sometimes like they don't care, they don't hear, they do, and they hear everything. And so as a parent, it's important to make sure you're taking care of yourself first. It's kind of to put the air mask on yourself before your kids on the airplane analogy. But really, if you're dealing with anxiety, you don't want to nurture anxiety. Because if you're nurturing anxiety, it communicates to your child, what I'm fearful about must be legitimate if they're taking this tact with me. So it has to be a little bit different, hey, come on, you've got this, because the more you allow your kids to avoid what is aversive to them, the greater the perceived fear becomes for them. So you don't want to let them out of those situations. You do want to help them go in. The best way to handle it is really going, because they look at you to see, is this okay? Is this ridiculous? Something physical like a head roll, eye roll. Oh, please. That's ridiculous. You're going to be fine. Everything's okay. Go. It's not up for discussion. Go, go, go. If you can get your kids back into the environment, their brain recalibrates really quickly. There's these messages of, so I'm here and everything's okay. And then it can flip that switch, and they can go into those environments a lot more frequently.
Gosh, these are such great tips. You can definitely convince yourself the other way, that I need to listen to my child and talk it through, and then that validates something totally ridiculous. And then I also see in my office conversation about COVID-19, and my brain is exploding, and I'm trying to stay calm, and I'm telling the mom, like, stop, do not talk like this in front of your child. And the kids leave here touching the elevator with their foot to get the elevator button. And I'm telling them, your child's going to be that weird child at school that's not normal. But the hay is in the barn. We have a long road ahead of us, because we are going to see the long-term effects of what happened this year. And we even see way too much coddling in the house, because we just can't stand the tantrums. So we're so lucky to have mental health specialists working overtime right now to help us reverse some of the habits and things we're doing. Let's see if we have any questions. We're going to be able to move smoothly through. I think you're touching on everything. So let's get to the last point, and that might leave us some room for more conversation. So the treatment is just When would you say you would want the pediatrician to help them gain access to you, or can someone call the Weichman Institute and say, hey, I've been noticing this. Can I get an appointment?
Absolutely. I mean, it's extremely easy to do an evaluation with the right specialist. Obviously, it's hard to get in with someone who works primarily with adults because it's really different hardware, so to speak. But if you got somebody who's pediatric and adolescent focused, and you just have concerns, it's very easy, at least for us at the Weichman Clinic, to do a three-step, three-session evaluation to circle back with the parents and say, look, here's exactly what's going on with your kid, or maybe there's nothing going on. You guys are fine. This is just more about you and your anxiety and your own issues, which happen sometimes. But, it's really about, here's the tools and here's the fix and here's what we need to start working with. And if, people are not in Southern California that are listening to this, then there's other ways to find people in your area. Psychology Today is a great resource where you can type in your zip code and specify child or adolescent, male, female types of issues. And it'll pull up a lot of people in your area, what they look like, what they charge, etc.
We have a good question here that is something I'm seeing a lot of. Someone is writing us that their 8-year-old's been showing some signs of OCD, hand washing, etc. during the pandemic. Should I take him to a psychologist, or will subside after we get back to normal? He's the one I just described.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of what you want to look for is that's going to help you with this is, was your child anxious and exhibiting any obsessive symptoms prior to the pandemic? Because if it wasn't there, it's a temporary situation in my eyes, as long as it doesn't start generalizing into other aspects and rituals that you start seeing, which could be, we see so much. It's, it's not just contamination. It'll spill out into, you touch one side, you got to touch the other side. Can't touch cracks. There's good numbers, there's bad numbers. Food can't touch on a plate. They wipe and they're not clean. They use a lot of toilet paper. Rituals before bed. Things have to be in certain orders. If you weren't seeing that beforehand, or you're not seeing that now, then it's more than likely an environmental issue that will hopefully get better for this individual in time. If you were seeing stuff like this prior to the pandemic, then this stuff has already been brewing, and the pandemic just added an accelerant to it. So at this point, if that was going on previously to the pandemic, then I would try to, help somebody, because really when it's all said and done, in most cases, we see OCD as a byproduct. A lot of the kids have a lot of underlying stress and anxiety for a prolonged period of time. And our brains are designed to try to figure out how to fix things. What's the fix? How do I make this better? And that's a lot of times how you start seeing OCD kind of come as a byproduct, is they start creating rituals to try to control their internal state, but those rituals don't change the thoughts in their head. And so that's how you start seeing other rituals coming into play.
Great. Something I have noticed is that a parent who has anxiety, and I do see quite a few parents with anxiety. Being a concierge physician, I think I have 20% of my parents, they love having access to a doctor because they have some level of anxiety and concern about illness. So then I do see how quickly that transfers to children starting at 2, and then the pandemic made it worse. So a parent also needs to see, where is this coming from? Like you said, mirroring, and go get help for yourself first. And that's always what I hear and see. The children aren't going to get help. The parents are going to get help until a certain age, when a child can actually talk and communicate well with a therapist and learn from them. So they have to learn from you. So if you're seeing excessive hand washing, you probably need help with a psychologist about how to manage that and talk through it and avoid the traps that Dr. Weichman just said, because I would probably try to talk through it and try to legitimize it for them and make it normal, when you're actually supposed to do the opposite with behaviors that are anxiety related.
Yeah.
So
it's really hard to be a parent. It's a thankless job. You sacrifice so much time, money, relationship with your spouse, all these things. But it's really, really important you put the air mask on yourself, regardless of whether that's you're getting your daily exercise, you're getting time with friends, if you're getting help when you need help. And there shouldn't be a stigmatism with getting help. If you're human, you're going to have mental health issues. It's just being human is we're all going to deal with periods of depression, stress, anxiety. And it's not that these things happen. It's what do we do to deal with it when they do happen? You know, it's very easy, especially with stress and anxiety, to be able to teach with the right person, people tools on how do you navigate this. And once you learn those, then you'll benefit and your family will benefit as well.
Mm-hmm. You're truly functioning as a role model when you put yourself first and are healthy mentally. Okay, going to our last, I don't see any more questions. Going to our last topic, habits. Oh, and this is close to what we're talking about. Habits to avoid during the pandemic. So right now we're at a tipping point where everyone agrees, let's get these kids back in school. We now know it's safe. It's safer than going to, someplace socially otherwise. So, and that definitely the numbers of depression, suicides, anxiety disorders are on a steep rise up. So getting kids back in school is the way to go. And what are habits that we can do to help with that transition and things we should avoid, like we were just discussing?
Yeah, those are great questions. Honestly, my recommendation is screen time, understandably, for a lot of kids through this past year plus has been up 3 times at least what we've normally seen. And as they start transitioning back in, I mean, obviously this is not good for their mental health. You want to start slowly weaning, just like if you were breastfeeding, weaning your kids, coming down each week a little bit more on their screen time to get them ready for what's coming. And I think it's really important now, even if your kid's not back in school yet, to have routines. Routines and expectations of here's what you do in the morning, here's what we're doing after school, here's what's going to happen next. Put it up on the wall and try to enforce it, because routines do a number of things for kids. Number one, it reduces their stress and anxiety because in this unpredictable world, there's predictability. That's why dogs love routines. Every time it's time for a walk, they're sitting there ready to go because that's what their expectation is. It really helps reduce stress, anxiety. And on top of that, it increases compliance over time, especially. So it's a lot less back and forth, a lot less you having to lose your cool with your kid because they're not listening. When the expectations are there stemming from the routine and you're enforcing it, it makes their life a lot easier. Other things that would be really helpful would just be trying to establish as much balance as you can for yourself and for your family. Just because there's limitations doesn't mean that we have to be a plant in the closet, because that's what's happening with a lot of kids right now. They're not getting the recommended amount of sunlight, sleep, exercise, social connectivity. And those things are either depressants or antidepressants, depending on if we're helping facilitate it or not. So we have to adapt. A lot of people mentally fight things they can't control, like a pandemic or what they've lost. And it's important that we adapt to what is in front of us, because that's a survival mechanism. It's been part of species survival for millions of years for a reason. Life changes in a way we don't want it to go. If we fight it, that's how we run ourselves into a lot of problems. Instead, if we can welcome it into our life and embrace it and make the most of what we still have to work with, that's how you get fluid through situations. So you got to figure out we're not gonna be able to go to a gym, or sports might not be going. How are we going to get our kid exercise and ourselves exercise? How do we get them that social connectedness and talking to other people? These things we need to facilitate for them, because it helps them to get ready for when life opens back up, reduces stress, reduces anxiety, reduces depression, and it makes the whole family system flow a lot better.
These are all great points. As a pediatrician, and after my discussion with Bill Sears, he's been a mentor to me and writes books on brain health. There's some very simple things that to hear once again summarized is, I think, useful. Sleep well. You mentioned that. It's the first thing that gets disturbed when you're...
Look, your kids are still growing brains. It's that important.
So good sleep hygiene, eating well. We know that carbs have an effect on the brain. So get the balanced diet in, and like Dr. Weichman said, everything balanced. Socializing smart, making great friendships. And there is a hormone release when we help others. This was talked about in that show, helping others and doing good. When you do good, it makes your brain feel good. And then one thing that was super lovely was to talk about positive affirmations that children can do for themselves before they go to bed, and asking them to pick 5 things they like about themselves, writing that on a mirror in the bathroom. So when they're brushing their teeth, it's in plain sight every day and they see it and they see the positive affirmations. And of course, as a parent, giving plenty of that and describing what you like about your child is always helpful. And lastly, I want to say, for years, I've been talking about surfers in Southern California children who are low in vitamin D. And we know vitamin D has so many roles, but just today I got labs back of a really healthy kid, but he struggled during the pandemic with some anxiety and depression, and his vitamin D was low. He's doing great now. He's back in school, thank goodness, and that's been wonderful. But his vitamin D is in the 20s, and we don't like that. We want people to be closer to 100. So get your child on vitamin D. I could tell you all the foods that you can get vitamin D from, but you will never get enough. You have to eat 10 servings of salmon a day to get the vitamin D, and that's one of the top foods with vitamin D. So that's not going to happen. So you need to be in a supplement, and the sun itself is damaging. So we don't want you to be getting an hour of direct sunlight on your skin. So other things, moving your body, right, Dr. Weichman?
Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm. So moving right. And for those of you, I'm going to share the best thing we did during the pandemic was we got this trampoline here. We didn't get this one, but this one is only a couple $100. It has a safety net. Maybe 4 times a day, our son's out there. Play some music. I love telling people, get a karaoke microphone. Those things are so fun. Get some Motown songs on. They're always uplifting. Have random dance parties once a day, after dinner, before dinner. Get the kids singing and moving their body. That really releases some endorphins. And then this Superpowers Academy, I'm wearing my Superpower necklace. They send you crates and they can help with the young ones, getting them activities that build self-esteem. My son made a mood wheel, and he can tell you his mood each day. And it comes with weather, and it's just super cool. It's a wooden wheel that you rotate, and it describes your mood, and you can be an extreme version of that mood or a mild one, or mix the moods. But having them learn how to describe their feelings is great. So these are, let's see, I wrote some other tricks. The positive affirmations, a karaoke microphone, the trampoline. Those are my little bag of tricks. Do you have any bag of tricks that you like?
Honestly, I think there's some really just fundamental tools we need to teach our kids, and I really believe that the foundation of mental health is resilience. How to be a mental fighter. Things get tough. You have to get tougher. I really do believe that God or life or whatever you believe in doesn't give us anything that we can't ultimately handle. And what's dropped in our laps is not meant for us to be down or overwhelmed by. It's meant for us to overcome, learn, and change and grow from. And in doing so, it leads us to who we're supposed to be and where we're supposed to be next in our life. These things are just hurdles. And so to try to help our kids with how to be resilient in situations is extremely important, because as they get older, what we see with the adolescent population or the preteen population is that the kids that are suicidal are the ones that have given up the fight. The minute you stop fighting is when you're going to get flooded with depression, anxiety, stress. And as you start hitting that kind of crescendo, that's when your brain starts thinking about a way out, and that's how suicidal thoughts start to get created. So, it's really something that's important, especially now when things are stressful. I think that what we're seeing is a lot of overthinkers, and thinking really is not good for you. Actually, thinking often creates problems. Thoughts create feelings, right? You can't be depressed or anxious typically unless there's a physiological issue, unless you have thoughts that create them first. So helping our kids on how to think positively, identify the positives in negative situations. There might be 30 negatives and 1 positive. It doesn't matter. If they can hold on to that 1 positive, they're going to be okay. And that's the name of the game of life. But helping them to spend more time in the here and now, thinking less about problems, because a lot of people, it's a natural human tendency to kind of think about problems and just sit in it. But the problem with that is it just compounds your problem. And so it's less about thinking and more about action. You know, our brains need to go, hey, here's the problem. What's the action I take to fix the problem? Or what's the workaround for this? And then you initiate it. Because we're seeing, understandably, a lot of people are spending way too much time in the future in their mind, where you're going to get stress and anxiety from that. A lot of people that think too much, they're going to get stress and anxiety from that as well. And we really want to prevent people from needing assistance in the first place if we can just get them some of the fundamental tools. And by the way, daily exercise, and especially intensive, whether you get a boxing dummy and you're having the kids box in the garage until sports open back up, or trampolining, like the more intensive the exercise for a minimum of 30 to 45 minutes, if they can get that preferably earlier in the day, they and we as adults will benefit tremendously on so many levels throughout the rest of the day as a result of getting that daily exercise. We're talking dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. You're going to have so much more of you to go around to deal with the stresses of the rest of your day. It is an imperative part of mental health.
Great. I'm just putting these last comments in. So people can find you at Dr. Jerry Wickman. I put that in the comments. And if you just Google Dr. Jerry Wickman, you'll find his website, but you can find him on Instagram, Twitter, I assume Twitter, correct?
Correct. And Facebook, it's just at Dr. Jerry Wickman. I'm trying to do what I can to regularly put stuff out and give people across the country tools, kids and parents. And a lot of stuff that we're putting out is stuff that you could read and learn and talk about with your kids that will benefit both them and you.
Yes. And I love that when we were discussing things right before we went live, your motto was, it's a bad business model, but I don't want to see them in my office. So anything you can do to prevent that, which is wonderful. So
yeah, happy to help people if they need it, but this is why we do these, so that you can learn and help yourself and then help your kids, and hopefully not need to go see somebody. But if you do, there's a lot of options out there, and you got to take advantage of it, because, you know, if you have a headache, you wake up, you take some Advil. The next day you have a headache, you're taking more Advil. By the third day, you're calling your doctor. We should have the same expectations with mental health, especially with ourselves and our kids.
Great. And I'm going to share this last page here. Let's hide these. I'm going to hide you for 1 second. Let's see if I can share his page. Okay, here we go. So you can, the bottom's being cut off, but you can see all of the public speaking engagements that he's done. You're coming back on screen. But all right, well, we're going to sign off. If there's any questions we missed, please write them here, and I will reach out to Dr. Wickman, and if there's something I can't answer myself. And again, you can find him at Dr. Jerry Wickman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care, everybody.